Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to head up to the northeast once again to Aberdeen where I used to study chemistry, and we're going to have a look at another beer from a brewery who I think are pretty interesting actually. So for this one then we are going to head to Dyce, just a little bit to the north of the city, and of course that is home to Fierce Beer, who do some really interesting big imperial stouts and stuff like that, but they're also quite well known these days for their fruit beers and fruit sours and things like that. Really interesting brewery this one, and they're very distinctive in terms of their artwork as well actually. So this particular beer is the Cranachan Killer, a raspberry pale ale coming in at 5.5% ABV, and you know, obviously from the name this one is modelled on the Cranachan dessert, which is a traditional Scottish dessert, basically fresh raspberries, cream, a little bit of oats, and I think sometimes they put a bit of a kind of whiskey or whiskey sauce in it, if I remember rightly, which is really interesting. I've not had Cranachan in years actually, but this reminds me of a Scotch ale that I had that was a collaboration between Cromarty and Buxton Brewery, if I remember right. It was this kind of slightly sour Scotch ale, which was really interesting. But yeah, looking forward to trying this one. It was the name that really caught my eye with this, and it's been a while since I've had one of the fruitier beers from Fierce as well, so I thought this would be a nice one to review during this trip home. So I hope you guys enjoy my take on it, and I'm excited to review another Fierce beer. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fierce Beer before. No doubt I will review some more at some point in the near future, probably on my next trip home. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, usually whenever I take a little trip home. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Fierce Beer then, on to my brewery notes. So as I mentioned to you already, Fierce Beer are based in Dyce, which is just a little bit to the northwestish of Aberdeen, if I'm remembering correctly, very close to the airport of course, and the company began life as the homebrewing experiments of David Grant, who had worked for many years in the oil industry. He'd been homebrewing since March of 2013, and after hosting a beer and food pairing dinner in May of 2015, his beer, where his beer received very good reviews, he decided that he was going to go professional, and it was kind of the right time for them actually, because the oil industry wasn't doing all that well at that point. But David is joined at the brewery by Dave McGarry, who also worked in the oil industry, and he used his redundancy package to put himself on a brewing course down at Brew Lab in Sunderland in the north of England. But in April of 2016 they moved into their brewery in the Kirkhill Industrial Estate in Dyce, which again is to the northwest of Aberdeen, and at the moment they're brewing around 800,000 litres of beer per year. They started canning their beers in early 2018. Before that it was all 330ml bottles, and they've now got their own bar on Ship Row in Aberdeen, which is of course called the Fierce Bar, and they want to move the brewery to a more central location in Aberdeen and to have a big sort of brewery and restaurant thing. I really look forward to when they're able to do that, but I don't know exactly where they're going to be able to base that, to be honest. Maybe it would have to be around like Baker Street or something like that, and that will be an interesting one for the future. But in May of 2019 they also opened up another bar on Rose Street in Edinburgh. And as of February 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced about 120 different types of beer according to Untappd. Some of those, of course, are barrel-aged versions and all of this, but I think they'll get a little bit more, even more prolific than they have been over the next little while. They're starting to release a special series of sour beers at the moment, from what I can gather. Some of these have already been released. They're in half-litre bottles, from what I understand, and they involve collaborations with a lot of other breweries, actually. Come to think of it, it would be really interesting to see Fierce Beer and Vault City actually do some collaborations together, because Vault City are getting a lot of plaudits quite rightly for their sour beers at the moment. And you know, Fierce Beer have always been good in that slightly sourish, fruity category as well. So that would be an interesting combination actually. So we'll need to see how that progresses. I look forward to seeing if those two do manage to pull off some collaborations together. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Fierce Beer for the moment. These guys are really starting to grow. I've seen their beers being exported quite a bit. I think they're actually available over in the States. I'm sure I've seen one or two of them in Japan from what I remember, and I think you can get them in like Australia and New Zealand as well. I've seen some of them in Copenhagen in Denmark as well actually. I've definitely seen them in Copenhagen. I'm pretty sure I saw them in Japan, not sure about Australia or New Zealand, but an interesting brewery, and as I say, they are trying to grow a little bit more, so definitely one that you want to try. I would recommend the Very Big Moose. That's a lovely big imperial stout. The Peanut Riot was a lovely porter. I need to try and find a more kind of straight up IPA from them as well. I don't think I've reviewed just a kind of regular sort of West Coast New England type IPA from these guys yet. I've reviewed about 8 or so beers, but there's not one like that kind of springs to mind. So that's definitely one to look at in the future. But yeah, an interesting brewery and definitely worth checking out if you get the chance. I wish I could get a hold of these beers a little bit more regularly, but hey ho. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. As always, check out the brewery website if you want to learn more. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with the latest goings on, and if you're interested in the different beers that they do, you can check out like Rate Beer, Beer Advocate and Untappd and things like that. So yeah, as you can see with this one, it's got the typical Fierce Beer type artwork on it, that sort of I don't know, I remember, can you call it like poison pen style artwork? You know, the newspaper cuttings all put together. I'm not sure if that's the right term for it. I'm by no means an art buff, but there you can see the Doberman with, I don't know what, I can't think what kind of gun with that would be. Is it a Luger or something? I don't think it looks like a long barreled Luger. I'm not sure. Some of you who are more aficionados on that kind of thing will be able to tell me, of course. There you can see the Fierce Beer symbol on the side there, and it says on the back of the can, Cranachan is a traditional Scottish dessert made using local raspberries. This pale ale is crammed with raspberries and really, you know, and really, oh, it's rubbed off, delicious, and really delivers a punch of fruit actually. 5.5% ABV. And yeah, like I say, it should be interesting. This one's obviously been intended for export as well over to Scandinavia because they have the pant things on it, which is great. But yeah, a 440ml can, this one. I think this is the first time I've had a taller can from Fierce Beer, if memory serves me correctly. I think most of them have been little 330s. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm curious to see how this one turns out. Like I say, I wanted to review a Fierce Beer, and the main reason for choosing this one was just the name. I thought Cranachan's always nice, and if it's a Cranachan Pale Ale, I think that will be really interesting. And you know, the other thing I guess was that I know Fierce Beer are pretty good when it comes to the fruity, hoppy side of things. So yeah, there's still a wee bit in the bottom there. We can actually get all of that in. So yeah, there we go. So as you can see with this beer, and as you would expect when it's a raspberry beer, it's poured a lovely kind of, how would you describe that, like a really bright kind of candied red colour actually. This one looks very, very nice. If I shine the light through this, I'm not sure how well you can see the colour. It looks a little bit more winey just because of the cover over my drum kit behind me, but trust me, this is a very kind of candy apple Christmas red almost. Very, very nice bright red. There's a solid finger of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head, but it does have a little bit of a kind of pink tinge to it, to be honest. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it looks really nice, and it has got a degree of haze to it, this one. I mean, I think if it's got oats in it, obviously you are going to get a little bit of that to it, but it looks very nice, and to be honest, if it's a raspberry pale ale, this is kind of what you would expect. So yeah, let's have a look at the aroma then and see how we get on with this beer. Oh yeah, straight away, juicy raspberries. It almost smells like if you smell, you know, like summer fruits diluting juice or whatever, if you smell the concentrate for that, it really reminds me of that. Some of these syrups that we get over in Sweden too, it's really lovely. That this one, to me, this just smells like diluting juice. It really does. The raspberries, the juicy raspberries, are kind of dominating the aroma, but it does smell as if it's a little bit more complex than that. Like it has, you know, maybe a wee bit of blackcurrant or a wee bit of strawberry or something. It doesn't, to me, this one doesn't smell like it's just straight up raspberries, but it probably is. it really reminds me of like summer fruits diluting juice that you'll get out of Asda or Tesco or Robinsons or something like that. Very big juicy fruity aroma out of this, and in fairness, I don't think there's too much else coming out of that. I mean, you can pick up a little bit of the oaty notes underneath, you can pick up a little bit of the grassiness from the hops and stuff like that. I'd be curious to know what hops they would use in this. Would they use a little bit of Williamette or something like that, or you know, maybe Enigma could be an interesting one to use, the Australian Enigma, because it gives you that kind of almost cranberry, red berry type aroma, and it's got the lovely smooth white grapey notes as well. That might be a possibility in this actually. It gives you the white grapey notes of Nelson Sauvin, but it has red fruity characteristics to it as well. That's a good point. Enigma might well be a shout for what hop they're using in this beer. I think if they were using Williamette or something, to be honest, you would maybe have a little bit more floral note out of the beer as well. And you do get some grassiness, you can pick up a little bit of floral quality right enough. But yeah, I suppose it also depends on when in the brew you actually add the hops as well, because if you add them, I'm guessing this is probably a 90-minute brew, a 90-minute boil, sorry, and the hops in this, going by the aroma, I think they've probably been added a little bit later on. I don't think this is going to be a very bitter beer, because when you want the bitterness out of it, you add the hops earlier on in the boil, of course. But yeah, it's a really juicy, fruity, almost candied smelling paleo, this one actually. You can smell that oaty smoothness, like I say, and other than that, there's not too much going on in it. Oaty base, juicy raspberries, but it's got a little bit of candied strawberry, blackcurranty. It's got a little bit of a complexity to it, to be honest with you, maybe even a little touch of like cranberry or something, and you've got a little bit of grassy and maybe a wee touch of floral character in there as well. A lovely smelling beer, but I think it's fair to say it's not the most complex of aromas that you're coming across, but it does smell lovely and very, very inviting, as I said. So yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy that aroma, because it really is very, very nice. This strikes me as a nice kind of summer beer almost, actually. But let's have a taste of this one and see how we get on. So this one is the Cranachan Killer, a 5.5% raspberry paleo from Fierce Beer in Dyce, just near Aberdeen here in Scotland. Let's get stuck into this one. Really curious to see what it has in store. Slàinte, skål. That's really nice, actually. It's got a wee, it's got a wee teeny hint of sourness to it, this. But it is mainly, it's more smooth, this beer. I wasn't sure whether this was going to be like a sour IPA or if it was just a fruit IPA or exactly what it is, and I'm still kind of trying to make my mind up about it, but I will say straight away, this is a very nice beer. It's more of I'd say this is more of a summer beer. This would be a very good sort of summer seasonal. But I suppose, you know, at Christmas you want things that are nice and sweet, so I can see why it's been released in this kind of early part of 2020 as well. But the main question is whether it's a good beer or not, and it is. But to be honest, wouldn't expect anything less of Fierce Beer. These guys are solid at what they're doing. So yeah, with this beer then, when you take it in, you will get a little bit of sourness out of it, and that is just the tartness of the raspberries, I think. I don't think there's really any. Yeah, I don't think they've used sour, you know, yeasts that are going to give you some sour notes in this one. I would be very surprised, actually. It comes across as more of like a fruit beer rather than a sour beer or wild ale or whatever you want to call it. But you get a little bit of that tartness out of the beer as you take it in, which is very nice. But this is it's a lovely solid beer, this one. By no means is this the most complex one that you're going to come across from Fierce either. You know, that's reserved for the, you know, the maple very big mousse and all these kind of things, the special barrel aged versions of that big stout that they have. But it really is lovely and solid. These guys are very good when it comes to more sessionable beers as well. So yeah, let's try and break the flavour of this down a little bit then. So in the middle of your palate, you can feel, I get a little bit of graininess out of this the further that you go into the aftertaste. To me it does get a little bit grainy further into the into the palate, but in the middle of the palate you do get a nice kind of smoothness out of it. It's got a lovely kind of oaty smoothness in there, and at the front of the palate, when you take this one in, like I say, you've got that lovely tartness from the raspberries, but it smooths out really nicely and gives you very juicy flavours when you go further into the aftertaste as well. It's interesting that I mean, when you have a Cranachan, it does have a little bit of a biscuity, kind of grainy thing to it from what I remember. And it really does pull that off quite nicely in the beer, I have to say too. On the hoppy side of things, if you go to the back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of earthiness there. As you come further forward along the sides of the palate, it gets a little bit more floral. There is an element of floral aromaticity on the front corners of the tongue, and then round the front curve of the palate, you can feel that it's a little bit lighter and grassy. But that said, you do get the raspberries around the edge of the tongue too. Whenever you add fruit into a beer, it sort of suppresses a little bit of the green side of the beer. It takes away a little bit of the IBU, and you do get that nice juicy raspberry flavour lingering on the edge of your palate too. This is really nice actually. I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. It's a bit of a shame actually if this one, I mean, I said earlier that this would be a very good summer seasonal beer, and it would, but it's a bit of a shame if this is only a one-off brew or whatever. I'm not sure how often they brew this one actually, but this is really nice. I hope they do this again actually. Yeah, I like that. I really do like that. I would love to try that on tap actually, because if you had it on tap, it would have an even smoother mouthfeel actually, and I think that would be really interesting for this one. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, the fruity side of things, as I always say, you get a little bit of that juicy fruity ester coming out of the beer on that little oily bubble behind the front curve of the tongue, and for me it's difficult to say what hop I would think is in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit of like Bramling's Cross or something, because it does have, this hop it has a little bit of that earthiness there, and the earthiness is a wee touch darker, which you normally find from English hops. The other one, as I said earlier, would be the American Williamette. Going by the flavours, I'm pretty sure, I don't think there's Enigma in this. I think Enigma's a little bit more soft and oily, if you like, and the fruits come out slightly differently for me. I'd be surprised if it was Enigma in this, even though some of the flavours do match up. As I always say, I like playing guess the hops with these beers, but the fruitiness is interesting. There's a little bit of a kind of candied strawberry thing in there. There is a little bit of a kind of blackcurranty type flavour as well. But as I say, the main component, as you would expect when it's a raspberry pale ale, it really has a little bit of that you know, raspberry juiciness coming out of the beer too. It's lovely. This is just it's one of the more kind of straight shooting beers, I guess, that I've had from Fierce Beer, but they are very solid in this kind of fruit beer category, so it's not surprising that it's turned out as well as it has. But yeah, I really like how this goes together. Thumbs up to Fierce Beer on this one. The hops, as I say, it's got a little bit more fruity complexity than just raspberry, but the raspberry just lingers there on the edge of your tongue, and you can feel it getting a little bit more sort of juicy the further you go into the aftertaste of the beer as well. I really like how that goes together. So in terms of the overall mouthfeel then, I would say this is quite light-bodied. It's really very crisp as well. Actually, this it really strikes me as more of a summer beer, to be honest with you. But we'll disregard that for just now. But very light, very crisp, and I would say overall this is quite a wet mouthfeel generally. It does dry out a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste. You get that bit of graininess in the middle of the palate, but I mean overall it is pretty damn nice, I have to say. I would say with this one thing that would be interesting is if they smoothed out the malt base a little bit and made it almost feel just a little touch creamier, because it has a little bit of the graininess in there which you would expect, but if they got a little bit more of a very slightly kind of milkshakey flavour out of this, that would be a very interesting direction to take this beer, but then you would lose some of the crispness that it has, so it just depends what you want out of this, I have to say. But a very crisp I think generally very crisp beer. As I was saying earlier as well, you get a little bit of tartness in the beginning, but it really rolls out and becomes very smooth, and, well, not very smooth, very juicy, if you like, the further you go into the aftertaste. I suspect there's a little bit of bitterness to this one, maybe around 20 IBUs or something like that, and it's not got too much in the way of sweetness. You might notice further in the aftertaste a little bit of a biscuity note coming out of this beer, but mainly quite a crisp, drinkable, kind of fruity pale ale, this one. So yeah, an interesting beer, this one, and definitely a good one to review for you guys here on the channel. So yeah, happy to return to Fierce Beer for something like this. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This is the Cranachan Killer, a really nice kind of crisp, drinkable raspberry pale ale from Fierce Beer in Dyce, just to the north of Aberdeen. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fierce Beer too. We'll definitely return to these guys the next time I'm home. Maybe even I'll pick up one or two of their beers in Copenhagen, because they do appear over there every so often. But awesome to try this one, and I hope you've enjoyed a little look at the Cranachan Killer. And do make sure you give Cranachan a try if you get the chance. So yeah, until the next time, it's Slanger just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Make sure you check out my social media, make sure you try some Fierce Beer, and I will catch you guys later. The Cranachan Killer, a raspberry pale ale at 5.5% from Fierce Beer in Dyce in Aberdeen here in Scotland. Slàinte, skål, cheers.